Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our first BLSA SIG today on neurodiversity. I'm very excited and a very popular topic, and thank you all for sending us through your questions so far. This is brilliant. Just a few. I'll be very quick and I'll hand you over to Elisabeth. If you don't already know, BLSA stands for Building Life Sciences Adventures, which is a conference, an online conference that we've run over a couple of years. And we have now kind of changed over to doing some regular webinars, which we think are, popular and hot at the moment. So just a few housekeeping points. We are happy for you to leave your cameras on if you're comfortable. Mics for now, if they can be on mute, that'll be great. And for those who haven't already sent in their questions anonymously, we'll be answering them throughout the session and at the end, depending on how much time we have left. But I'm sure we'll be able to cover as much as we can. And by all means, if you're not comfortable, sharing your name or the questions in the chat, please do send them privately to me. I'm more than happy to ask them on your behalf. So I won't keep you much longer, and I'll hand you over to Elisabeth. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mona Lisa, and I'm really pleased to be talking on this subject and to have such great attendance. And it was really wonderful. Mona Lisa shared the attendance list with me in advance to see that several of you are coming from the same companies. And one of the things that I'm really keen on is to see what change can be made within an organization. So I'm hopeful that where you've come from, several of you from the same company, that it will give you some information that you can take back and hopefully create change. But anyway, I've sort of dived in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. So let's do a bit of a setup for the meeting. As Mona Lisa said, by all means, keep your videos off if you prefer. If you have them on, it kind of helps me to feel connected and listened to. So I'm already seeing Emma and Richard, and I can put a face to your names, and that feels wonderful. So if you're able to do that, then do. But if you have a reason not to, I totally respect that. You've been asked to stay on mute. I will take questions as I can as I go. So if I say something and you really feel the urge to be able to ask a question or say something, use the virtual hand on Zoom. So that will pop up, and I'll know that you want to ask a question. And I might not give you the floor straight away if I'm in mid-thought, but I will respond as soon as I can. And we will have additional Q&A at the end. So I hope to make this interactive, so it's not just me talking in a monotone, in a monologue. So we will do that as much as we can. I'm thinking we will have a short break partway through. We'll see how the time goes. And obviously, if you feel you need to take a break, please do so, as this is being recorded and you'll have access to the slides at the end. Then hopefully you won't miss too much if you need to leave the virtual room for a bit. Yeah. So if there's anything else you need to get the most out of this seminar, either ask me, put it in the chat, or do whatever else it is you need to get the most out of today. So a little bit of background about myself. So my mission is to raise individual and organizational awareness. And I put a lot of emphasis on neurodiverse strengths because so often, both in the medical scenario and throughout our lives, to be frank, people put emphasis on what we're not doing and what we could do differently. So I like to put the emphasis on the strengths, of which we have so many. And for me, it's about helping people to really thrive. So this line used to say, what individuals need to be their best at work. And someone pointed out to me that they put so much emphasis on that when they go home, they then collapse. And so for me, it's about helping you to thrive at work and at home and how to make that happen. So I have lived experience of neurodiversity. I'm the parent of a young adult who has been diagnosed with both autism and ADHD, and I have some of both of those myself. My work used to be about training and coaching managers and working with teams, and I witnessed what was going on with some people who were neurodivergent when that was not understood by their organization. And the people that I coach now, I experience that all the time. Or I hear their experience of that all the time. Sometimes I've got the pleasure of co-coaching an individual and their manager, and that can be transformational for them. And that's just wonderful to witness. So I am a qualified coach with the International Coaching Federation. I'm also a coach with Genius Within, who support people who are neurodivergent, whether they've been diagnosed or not. So I'm qualified with them. And I'm going through some additional training to understand ADHD. I've got 40 hours already under my belt with them. I'm going to have a full week to complete that in August in Falmouth, which would be absolutely wonderful face to face. So hopefully that gives you some idea of my credentials. So as Mona Lisa mentioned, you were all invited to complete a pre-seminar questionnaire. It went out quite late, so you won't all have had a chance to complete it. The questions that the responses that I had before yesterday, I've reflected in the slides. The ones that came in yesterday, Mona Lisa is going to help me navigate. And then, as she said, you are more than welcome to submit further questions, either to everyone in the chat or anonymously to Mona Lisa through a direct message to her. If we don't get to answer all of the questions today, which is very likely, in fact, I haven't asked Mona Lisa this yet, but I will ask her to save the chat, share it with me so I can answer further questions in the chat. And I'll be sharing my contact details at the end, so you're very welcome to get in touch with me as well. So what we did get before additional replies came in was your current level of understanding of neurodiversity, where 1 is low and 5 is high, and we've got a good level of understanding, but I never assume anything. So there will be some of you who don't. Obviously, that was a very subjective question, and it's likely there will be some aspects of neurodiversity that you won't be familiar with. So hopefully you'll all take away something, and I will ask you at the very end of today to share one insight, one learning, one action that you're taking away. A large proportion of those who replied have lived experience of neurodiversity, which is always very useful to know. And there was some requests for specific information on ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, depression and anxiety. I have a bit more to share today on the first 3. I will reference the other 3. And again, you're welcome to ask me after today for more information. So what I'm hoping to cover today is something about the terminology, strengths and challenges, the legislation, how individuals can advocate for what they need and want, mainly at work, but it can spill over to other situations, and what organizations can do to be neuro-inclusive. So that's the plan. We'll see how we get on. I'm going to pause there, Mona Lisa, just to see if there's anything specific from the chat that you want to share with me.
Not just yet, thank you.
Okay, cool. Right, so we will begin on the terminology. So I have here a picture of a very biodiverse environment. We have lots of different plants, different sizes, different colors, slightly different environments in terms of light and water and soil. And every plant is thriving because it's got exactly the conditions it needs to thrive. But they're different. And neurodiversity is a bit like that. We are each unique. We are each wired differently in how we think, how we feel, how we go about things. And that's what makes us neurodiverse. And ideally, the environments in which we find ourselves will provide what we need to thrive. When we're at work, it tends to be a bit of a uniform environment. And that's where we can struggle because we don't necessarily fit the sausage mold of what's provided at work. And I think there was one question which referred to as we're growing up as children as well. And of course, the same is school, the same is true of school and other environments that we find ourselves in. So I'll talk more about that difference between the social and medical view of neurodiversity. I'll talk some more about that later. But in an ideal world, we would each have the conditions that enable us to thrive. So there are quite a few terms out there, and it's changing all the time. And I'm sure I've got some of these out of date, and there'll be more. But as I said, neurodiversity is the whole diversity of the human race, how our brains are wired. And neurocognition is how our brains work. And a term that can be used is neurodivergence. Neurodivergence from some typical norm, sometimes called neurotypical. And 15 to 20% of us allegedly are neurodivergent. And I'm always amazed by the number of people that I meet who are neurodivergent. And I think, is it really only 15 to 20%? Who knows? But that is the current received figure. And sometimes we refer to those of us who are neurodivergent as neurominorities. I did a version of this seminar previously with One Nucleus as a panel session, and one member of the panel said, you know, one day, wouldn't it be wonderful if there are no labels? And I agree with him. However, there is also a use for labels. It can be useful. So we'll talk about that if we've got time. And already I'm loving the body language that I'm getting from people with their cameras on. It's great to see some nods and smiles going on. What I'm sharing is obviously resonating with you, which is great to hear. Okay, so I'm now going to talk about neurodivergent strengths, and I will talk about challenges as well, because we do need to be cognizant of those. As I said, I work with Genius Within, so I'm using some of their material because it kind of says it all. So here is their visual of the 15 to 20% of us who are neurodivergent, or of the neurominorities that we talk about. And what I love about this visual is it emphasizes the strengths. And so some of you were asking about autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. So you can see some of the strengths of those different neurominorities. And I'm going to talk some more about 3 of those. And someone asked about anxiety and depression. And being neurodivergent is not a mental health condition, but it can come with mental health issues. So if anybody has been misunderstood, felt out of place, different, unseen, undervalued in their lives, trying to fit in with something that doesn't feel natural to them, that can bring on depression and anxiety. So it's not unusual for people that I coach to come with a history of anxiety and depression, and many of them will be receiving counselling at the same time as they're receiving coaching. So I just want to acknowledge that those are real things, and as this visual shows, if you are suffering from mental health issues, then it is going to affect how you think and feel and how you do things. And I'll be talking quite a bit about executive functions, and our ability to concentrate, to remember things, to solve problems, to deal with stress. It will be influenced by these things. So it always surprises me still how many people who are neurodivergent haven't yet come across this visual of spiky profiles. And for those of you on the call who don't regard yourself as being neurodivergent and are here to learn more, this is an invaluable graphic as well for you to be aware of. So the spiky profile suggests that people who are neurodivergent are specialist as opposed to generalist thinkers, which means that we will have some strengths which are really strong. And often, actually, we take them for granted. We think that because they are so easy for us to do, it's nothing special. And yet, occasionally, someone will go to you and say, "Wow, I love your directness," as opposed to saying you're so rude. I love your directness, and that's not a challenge. It's actually a super strength in situations where a lot of people will tread ever so softly about saying what they're thinking and feeling. To have someone just come out and say it can be so helpful and pave the way for other people to then say it. So that's just one of many strengths. Now, I'm not going to explain all of these graphics, partly because I never remember what they are, but partly because I'll be coming in onto those as we explore different neurominorities. So along with those strengths will come challenges where often we will find some things much more difficult than your neurotypical person might. And so that's what creates that spikiness. And that's what means that very often all the emphasis is put on the things that we find difficult, and we lose sight of those wonderful strengths. So again, some of the people that I coach find this so useful and so affirming, and they realize that the things they find difficult does not make them a bad person. It's just the reality of the way their brains are wired. And instead of trying to fix those problems, it's about, as one of you said in your pre-seminar questions, it's about finding the coping strategies that enable you to, really use your strengths while taking account of some of the challenges that you might have. Annalisa, are there any burning questions or comments before I
Oh, I just popped in the chat, but happy to join. On this note, I was thinking, someone popped in a very interesting question. If you are aware of any, are there any scientifically proven techniques that can help advantage these strengths that neurodivergent people have?
Yeah, great question. So obviously I'm a coach, so I'm biased. Genius Within does multiple things, not just coaching. And one of the founders is a scientist. Her name, I think, has come up on some of these, and I'll remember it in a minute. But she's a scientist, and she's perpetually doing scientific research. And I haven't actually included this slide in here, but she has collected the data that shows that coaching definitely increases one's performance in your job. It increases job retention, and there's another thing. But yeah, so definitely coaching helps, and obviously what coaching is doing is it's helping you find the strategies that enable you to really lean into your strengths and address your challenges. I will not minimize medication, because medication can also help enormously too. So again, some of the people that I'm coaching, many of the people that I'm coaching are using medication as well to help them. So I'm sure there is scientific evidence of that, but certainly I'm seeing it, and people are experiencing the difference that it makes. Okay, so this is another one that people find quite eye-opening, the concept of intersectionality and masking. So basically what this means is that many people who are neurodivergent are actually dealing with other stuff in their lives too. So it could be that they are non-white in an environment that certainly around Cambridgeshire or around the life sciences in Cambridge, there's still a very large majority of people who are white. So at work, that might be a factor. Sexuality is a factor. A lot of people that I come across who are neurodivergent also fall into the LGBTQ plus sector, for want of a better word, and there's still not as good acceptance and inclusivity for that as there could be. I do my little bit by putting she, her after my name to hopefully make it psychologically safer for other people to speak about how they are, both in terms of sexuality and gender. Disability could also be a factor, and of course nationality, and I love how the Cambridge life science community is very multinational, international. But because of all these differences, people can feel marginalized. Misdiagnosis is not unusual, and masking, which is where people are covering up who they really are and aren't able to just present themselves as they are. And that can cause all sorts of stress as well, and mental health issues, which we've already discussed. So I think being aware of and acknowledging in your organizations that people may be coping with multiple intersectionalities could be very supportive as well.
Could I just jump in there quickly,
Sure, go
actually,
for
if
it.
that's all right, Elisabeth? So I came across a question that relates to the latest slide, and we were wondering, what is the best way to navigate this natural hostility, that some people develop for others that are, different as such?
I think it's going to be different for every person.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an answer in terms of the individual, and there's an answer in terms of the organization. So in terms of the organization, and I'll come back to it later on, whatever you can do to role model, celebrate, have champions for different minorities, so-called minorities, so that anyone coming to work can see that there are others like them, that they belong in some way, that they're not marginalized, and to make it safer for individuals to speak up and to demonstrate to other people who might otherwise be hostile that everybody's welcome. For an individual, you need to find your way individually as to what feels safe and possible to talk about. I think I'll come back to that one later, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the really important thing as I carry on talking is to recognize that when you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person, whether they're autistic, ADHD, is dyslexic, dyscalculic. I'm being deliberate about, there's a whole thing about, do you speak about it as an identity, or do you speak about it as a condition that you have? And different people feel differently about that. And again, from the panel discussion that I did previously, one of my panel members used this phrase, never assume, which I think is so wonderful. We should never assume. If we know, if someone's told us that they're autistic, for example, never assume what that means. And a great question to ask is, what does autism mean to you? So that we learn it from the person rather than assuming we know. Okay, so I'm going to do a little exploration of just some of the neurominorities. And so this one, again, is taken from Genius Within. If you go to the Genius Within website, geniuswithin.org, you will find descriptions for each of these neurominorities. So the ones I don't cover today will be on there as well. And what they do, and I use this in my coaching, is they do this graphic that shows in purple all the strengths and in teal all the challenges. And again, not everyone who's autistic will have all of these strengths or all of these challenges, and they will have others that are not on this slide. But I think it's a wonderful way of celebrating the strengths and acknowledging the challenges. And I showed this to somebody just this week, and I said, what are your thoughts on seeing this? And she said, I feel like I belong. She has spent all her life feeling like she doesn't. So yeah, that's kind of, I feel quite emotional about that. But yeah, so here are some examples on autism. People who are autistic may have strengths in how they process information. And that can be the detail, but it can also be finding patterns. So there are artists who are autistic. Again, we tend to stereotype anyone who's autistic must be an IT geek or a technology geek. They can also be an artist. So again, never assume. They will have special requirements in terms of how they manage their energy. So people talk about spoons of energy. And again, that's something that we talk about in coaching as well. They may have difficulty with verbal communication. I was just reminded vividly today through some coaching for myself how I do my best thinking after something's happened. And in the moment, I can become totally inarticulate. And so, I process information and I communicate best when I've had a chance to think about it. Yeah. So yes, so all sorts of strengths and all sorts of challenges. And of course, the challenge that we hear about most often is overstimulation and stress, which again comes back to the working environment. Why should we all be comfortable in working in an open plan with strip lighting and no windows? I'm exaggerating, but again, that often comes up. Just the need for a bit of consideration about your working environment and the working environment that will work best for you, rather than being obliged to fit in or being accused, as I once heard one HR person say, being accused of being a prima donna. Yeah, not good. Now, the other myth I want to dispel is that autism is a spectrum. It's not. We are not less or more autistic. We just have different autistic strengths and challenges. And so the diagram on the right reflects that. So we may have more or less challenges and strengths. Again, we're each unique, and it's our environment that will enable us to really shine, bring our strengths through, overcome our challenges and our coping strategies as well. So we no longer talk about, I can't even think of the words now, highly functional? No, what's the word? Help me out, Mona Lisa. It's gone straight off my head because I'm not using them anymore.
Oh, I'm not entirely sure. Sorry.
Okay. Low functioning, high functioning. I think that's
I
the
think
name.
so.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not
Could I
about, yeah.
could I jump in with a quick question in there, if
Sure.
that's all right? I thought this might be suitable for autism. Someone did ask how to tell people I am autistic, or whether to
Mm.
tell them. How do I know? Or how to?
So again, it's going to depend on the individual
Mm-hmm.
and the situation that you're in, how safe you feel
Mm.
in your environment, how safe you feel from stigma and stereotyping, and how convinced you are that you will be accepted or be able to talk about what it means for you, or sometimes just how damn bold you feel. I'm just going to come out and say it and deal with the consequences. It's going to depend on the individual, and how you feel. I'm going to come back to this later, but you
Thank
don't
you.
need to have a diagnosis and you don't need to say that you're autistic in order to get the adjustments that you need at work.
Thank
That's
you.
quite important. Now, we did get a question about monotropism, which I looked up because it wasn't a term that I was familiar with. Apparently, it was coined by Dina Murray, who died recently. She co-wrote a paper about it, which is available on ResearchGate. And then I found this one on the British Psychology Society, I think that's right, website. So it's the tendency for our interest to pull us in more strongly than most people. It's based on a model in the mind called interest system. We're all interested in many things, and our interests help direct our attention. Different interests may be relevant, important at different times. And in a monotropic mind, fewer interests tend to be aroused at any time, and they attract more of our processing resources. So it makes it harder for us to deal with things outside of our current attention tunnel. And the way that shows up for some of us is if we're really focused on doing a piece of work, and I hear people who are ADHDers talk about this as well. If we're really focused on doing a piece of work and someone comes and interrupts us, it can completely throw us, make us unable to answer their question, make us angry, frustrated, upset. Yeah. Which is why agreeing as a team how you are going to manage people's need to concentrate and not be interrupted is so important. So yeah, that was a little diversion around monotropism. Mona Lisa, feel free to interrupt me anytime if there's a question that's come up that people are burning to ask. And again, just a reminder, people, if you want to raise a hand, you can, but use the Zoom feature to do it, because I won't see you if you just put your hand up.
Thanks,
Okay.
Elisabeth.
Thank you. Right, so ADHD, again, another lovely visual from Genius Within. Again, it will differ with different people. I'm coming across an increased number of people who are both autistic and ADHDers. So we've got this fascinating flip-flop going on between people who are autistic, who really pay attention to detail, and people who are ADHDers who lack attention to detail. If you are both, how does that play out for you? I think that's absolutely fascinating. ADHD are great at solving problems, strong 3D visual skills, which basically means if you love if you have a hobby that involves making three-dimensional robots, Lego, solving problems, Rubik's cubes, if you remember those, that's strong 3D visual skills, and people can bring that into their work as well. So I don't know, if you work in genetics and you do models and you enjoy looking at three-dimensional models, you know, that may be a strength. If you're a chemist, making chemical structures, you know, that may be where your strengths come through. Passion and enthusiasm, alertness and ability to hyperfocus. And also we know that some ADHDers have struggle with focusing their attention. And we have that here, difficulty concentrating. The flip side of being interested in lots of stuff is taking on too much. Difficulty with people showing up here as well, so it can appear rude. Yeah, so a whole mix, and the energy thing is very relevant here as well. So in my coaching, in the additional learning that I'm doing, this model is really relevant. This depiction of executive function, different executive function areas, and the challenges that people might experience in them. And I love the use of the term activation as a much more positive version of procrastination. So people who are ADHDers will often beat themselves up about procrastinating, being accused of being lazy, when it's actually about activation. And there's a lovely book by Devon Price called Laziness Does Not Exist, where they argue that actually people who are accused of being lazy often do much more, cram much more into their time than anyone else. Yeah, so again, I think this is a very useful depiction to reflect on if you are an ADHD or if you are working with people who are.
Am I okay to pop in a quick question, Elisabeth?
Go for it. Yeah.
We have a question in the chat just now, which says, are there resources to be able to help identify, you know, this variety of traits in people, obviously outside of work and within?
Yeah. Resources. So if you are able to have a conversation, if you are a manager with an individual, and you're able to have a conversation about, I don't know, the manager could ask a question like, what could I be doing that I'm not already doing to support you at work? And if as a manager, you can be vulnerable and share some of the things that you find challenging at work and how you deal with them, then hopefully you can create a safe space for the person who reports to you to then be able to talk about what they find challenging, without it being described as a failing. So that could be one thing. And similarly, you know, outside of work with friends or family, can you have that kind of conversation? If you are an individual and your manager does not ask you that question, how about having a go at next time you're having a conversation about your work? Oh, there's some things that would really help me if you were able to support me, or if you could, or if we could have a discussion within our team about this. And I'll talk some more about this later. But it's about opening up the conversations. Then there's coaching. Then there are also various diagnoses. So obviously, getting a medical diagnosis, there are waiting lists. It's expensive if you go privately. But you know, there are options available there, and then there are various online tools as well. So there's a paid for one on the Genius Within website. I believe in my references, which I'll show if there's time. There are also some that no, that's paid as well. But there are various online ones that you can take, which obviously is not going to be as thorough as a medical diagnosis, but can still give you some pointers.
Thank you. Not sure if you have time for this one quick question. As we were talking about diagnosis, if
Yeah.
I've understood this question correctly, is it appropriate to disclose when you have a diagnosis? And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier about feeling safe and comfortable to do so.
It's exactly the same. So you choose your environment. You don't have to disclose. It can be helpful to get the conversation going, but you've got to feel comfortable with doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I better speed on a bit. I'm keeping up the time. So dyslexia was the other one that I'd pre-prepared. Prevalence 10%, again from the Genius Within website. People are often surprised when they see this because, again, we make assumptions about what it is to be dyslexic. And look at this, great long-term memory, great communication skills, great problem-solving abilities, that 3D visual skill again. So, wow, those things are there. And yes, difficulty reading and writing. But look at this, difficulty remembering sound. And often people don't realize that that's a thing, difficulty processing sound. So here am I talking ever so fast in this seminar. If there's anyone who's dyslexic on here, you might be finding it difficult to keep up. We didn't put the captions on. Sometimes putting the captions on Zoom calls can help people to process information who find sound difficult to keep up with.
I do believe they are turned on. Sorry, I
Okay.
should have mentioned this in my introduction. At the bottom of your page, I think on my end, is on the right, there's a button that says show captions. If you do need them, they are enabled.
Thank you. So yes, so probably more to learn there about being dyslexic than people thought. And the same will be true for all the neurominorities that I haven't covered today. This is potentially where we could have a 2-minute break. Could people put their virtual hands up if they would like a 2-minute break? And don't worry if you're in the minority, it's just useful to know. Yep. Let's have a 2-minute draw breath, and we'll come back at well, 2 minutes. It's very quick, 2 minutes. Yeah. Thumbs up as well. So I'm gonna turn my video off for 2 minutes and then we'll come back in a
Sounds
couple.
good.
Yeah. Started with very unspecific about my 2-minute break, about when that started and when that finished. So I'm just going to wait for a few more videos to come back on so that I know those people who had their videos on before, or others, are back. Thank you. We'll just wait for another 1 or 2 people to switch your videos back on so I know you're back, and then we'll start. Yes, I've just seen, sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name, Katsia Arena's question, resources for non-inclusive workplaces. I'm going to get to that. So yeah, we will get to that. Okay, the people that I knew were on before are back. So I'm going to resume. So the legislation. So this is a quote from the GMB website, which I think says it all. So under the Equality Act of 2010, Neurodivergent workers are likely to meet the legal definition of disability, so it provides them with important rights to reasonable adjustments and protection against discrimination, harassment, and victimization. So basically, if you are neurodivergent, you are entitled to reasonable adjustments. And not all neurodivergent workers will consider themselves to be disabled, and workers have the right to identify or not identify with the term as they see fit. So you don't need to say you are neurodivergent. You don't need to disclose a diagnosis. You don't need to have had a diagnosis. You just need to be able to have the conversation at work with your manager, HR, occupational health, to say, there is some stuff I need to help me do the things I need to do at work. And you should be able to have that conversation, whatever. So a workplace could be discriminating against you in various ways. So here's a picture of 3 people watching a football match. Oh, do I dare mention football? I don't know. Watching a football match. There's a solid fence, which 2 of them can see over. They've all been given boxes. So they've all been treated equally. The organisation recognises that a wooden fence can get in the way of people being able to see the games, so we've been given boxes to stand on. But hey ho, they're all the same size, and this person still can't see over the fence. And actually, the tallest person didn't need a box at all. So they have been given equitable treatment. They've been given what they need to suit their particular circumstances, their particular disability, their particular neurodivergence. They've been given what they need. This is reasonable adjustment. But wouldn't it be wonderful if actually the organisation realised that the problem is not with the people, it's with the fence. So let's change the fence and make it see-through. And then everybody can see, whatever their height, whatever their disability, whatever their neurodivergence, they can all take part equally in the football match. They can all take part equally at work, because the obstacles that work has created have been removed. This is also known as universal design. It's not easy. It's not always possible, but that's what neuro-inclusive organizations could be aspiring to. So people don't even have to ask. So that's my radical statement. Done. What does it mean in practice? Because we're short of time, I'm going to speak to this for both individuals and organizations. So if you're an individual, I've already said, let's see if you can trigger a one-to-one conversation with your manager, with HR, with occupational health about what you need to support you at work, recognizing that you don't have to disclose that you're neurodivergent. If you think it's helpful, do. If you're a manager, if you're an organization, encourage those one-to-one conversations to be not just about work, but about how an individual is experiencing work and what they need to thrive at work. Now, how about sharing in a team? And instead of going, oh, we've got 1 or 2 people we know are autistic or ADHDers, let's have a meeting when they can tell us what they need in the team, so everyone in the team knows. How about changing that to, let's have a team discussion where we go around the room and each individual talks about what they need in order to thrive at work. So you're not singling out one person. I'm quite passionate about these things. You can have an access to work discussion. So this is a website. Access to Work is a government, is still government funded facility where you can have an assessment of your workplace. You can apply to get coaching. You can apply to get co-coaching. You can apply to have neurodiversity awareness raising training for your organization. Yeah, all of that is available. So you can ask for that as an individual. You can offer it as an organization. Neurodiversity passports. So some people I'm coaching are actually getting these. May or may not be a good thing, depending on your point of view. But it's a document that you can fill in that specifies exactly what you need for work. And it goes with you in an organization from job to job. So you don't have to repeat it. It's there and it's available. You may or may not feel comfortable with doing that. An organization may or may not choose to provide that. So that's another thing. And the kind of reasonable adjustments that you could explore are, and COVID did us some favors with this because sending us all to work from home, some people realized that actually working from home really makes a difference. Some people actually realized it so strongly that on the back of it went for a diagnosis for neurodivergence because they realized there was something here that had been causing them to mask and make themselves work in a particular way through all their careers. And suddenly, oh, just the act of working at home makes it so much easier to do what they need to do. And then other individuals working from home, complete nightmare. Please let me get back to work and interact with other people and not be distracted by my ironing and my washing and deliveries and so on. So, but flexibility. So some people that I coach find that having the flexibility to work from home part of the week, in the office part of the week, really enables them to thrive. And similarly with adjusting working hours. So we all know that some of us are best in the morning and some of us are best in the afternoon and evening. If our job can allow some flexibility so we can work the hours when we are at our best and still fulfill our responsibilities, let's have a discussion about that. Again, that was another example that an HR person shared with me about prima donnas. I thought, no, you've got some learning to do. Look at your roles and responsibilities. Job descriptions still talk about got to be a good team player. What does that really mean? And is it essential for every job? The other aspects of roles and responsibilities that fit into that. I've talked a lot about coaching. I've mentioned the other two, awareness training and champions, having staff networks. Some organizations already have well-being ones. Why don't you go a step further and have neurodiversity ones? So these are all examples of how individuals can advocate for themselves and how organizations can be more neuro-inclusive. This is a very detailed slide, which you'll benefit from by being shared afterwards. It just gives some very specific examples of things you can do differently in your communications, for meetings and in the environment that will help people who are neurodivergent, and hey, will actually help people who aren't neurodivergent too. So yeah, take a quick screenshot or wait for the slides to come out to have this. I'm broadly aiming to finish the bulk of this at 2 so that we've got 15 minutes for Q&A afterwards. I think that was the intent. And I've not made this as interactive as I hoped because I have way too much to share. Sorry about that. So yeah, this is just a reminder that the whole employment cycle provides you with touch points for where you can be more neuro-inclusive and where you can advocate for what you want. And it comes from a book I've written, a chapter in a book I've written, a chapter on neurodiversity in relation to coaching. The whole book is about coaching. But yeah, from the point where you decide that you want to recruit people through the recruitment process, getting people on board at work, their ongoing development, retention, and even when people leave, there are things that a neuro-inclusive organization can do perhaps better than you're doing already. And, you know, it's worth looking at the websites of some organizations like, I don't know, Microsoft, to see some of the things that they put in their language that shows that they are more neuro-inclusive in their recruitment. But it would be worth looking at other life science websites to see how maybe some life science organizations are tackling that. And as an individual, you are entitled, if you're going for interviews, to ask to see the questions beforehand, to bring a buddy, to know who's going to be on the interview panel, to get some background on what the working environment will be like. You know, you're entitled to ask for these things. And if the people you're asking don't provide it, then that's some indication of how neuro-inclusive or not, you know, they might be. So these are what I've already covered through the one slide earlier. And these are various resources. These are just some of many. For those of you who want to learn a lot about neurodiversity, Professor Amanda Kirby's newsletter that she shares through LinkedIn is amazing as a source of information. So, you know, subscribe to that. It's free. Genius Within website I've already mentioned. Amanda Kirby has her own organization through which you can also do an online, it's not a diagnosis really, but it gives you a heads up about what your strengths and challenges might be. And as I said, there's one on Genius Within as well. These websites are just great. ADHD in adults, terrific resources. And then the autism, the National Autistic Society, Adult Dyslexia Centre. You have some great resources online. So, we've now got time for some Q&A, and I'd love to get people's comments in the chat about, if you need to leave already, what one thing have you learned or will you do as a result of today? But let's, I think I can stop sharing. Oh, no, I'll just share my details so you've got those as well. As I said before, I'm rather passionate about this topic. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk about it. Here are my contact details if you want to be in touch. But we now have time for Q&A. And I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see faces and see the chat. Okay, great.
Would this be, while we wait for questions to come in, should I jump in with some more questions that we've had from our survey? Would that be great?
Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure if we covered this entirely, but someone asked, how can we educate managers to appreciate, you know, different neurotypes and not automatically label these type of individuals as undesirable or less capable?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Obviously, you can try and do that on your own. And you might be able to do it. You might be able to do it. You might be able to go, oh, you know, those strengths that you keep praising me about, those are examples of my neurodiversity. And by the way, there's quite a few other people in this organization, without naming names, who have these kind of strengths or similar strengths that one would associate with neurodiversity. You know, and the things that you tell me off about are the challenges that inevitably come with that. So you can try and do that on your own, but it's not necessarily easy. You can argue for a neurodiversity staff network. You can get someone in to do a seminar for you. I'm available. So yeah, all of that could help.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Did you know that dyslexia had implications for memory and processing? Oh, did not know.
No, I didn't either. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I think this is something that's been mentioned not long ago, and I think it kind of correlates to this one question. if you can answer, how can companies create neurodiversity specific policies, which include detailed information on reasonable adjustments are allowed for individuals?
You could start with the quote that I put up from the GMB union, and look at the legislation and get some text on there and show that is something that as an organization you are aware of and support, and put that on your intranet for staff, as well as putting it on your extranet. You could make sure that whoever you've got supporting your occupational health is totally tuned into this, so that and HR, so that if individuals go to them, they can get the support they need. And now I've forgotten your question.
About implementing specific policies.
Okay.
How can one company create?
Yeah, start with legislation. There is an HR special interest group, isn't there? With this.
There is, and I've got to note it down actually.
Get that on the agenda, get that on their agenda, get them talking about it, so that you can share between different organizations what others are doing. And trawl your favorite companies on the internet and see what they're doing. Yeah, I think all of that. Ask for your occupational health people to be trained up on this if they're not already. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in with a question of mine, actually, that just popped into my head. How, on this note, as a company that doesn't specifically have one of these in place, or are not fully aware of neurodiversity, how do you go to your line manager and be like, okay, can we have him? I wouldn't know how to ask this, but I think maybe as a team we should look into having some sort of awareness brought in, or even if it means having a 1-hour seminar like this one. How do you go and have that conversation?
Well, as I said at the beginning, there are several of you who are from individual companies. So if 4 of you go back and go, I've just been to this seminar on neurodiversity, there's all sorts of stuff that I've been learning. And one of the things that I think would be really good for us is this. Go for it.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay. So
I'm just
Richard,
having a look.
and can I jump the queue and get Richard
Of course, yeah.
Go for it, Richard.
I'll just say for myself that I only found out I don't mind saying this in this chat, I was diagnosed autistic last year. I'd gone for an ADHD assessment, and I also flagged up some things for autism, and so it came as something of a surprise. So for me, I'm also finding out what it means to be autistic, and what support there is out there for someone like me as a late diagnosed adult. And so often it's the case, particularly with late diagnosis, that when you sort of say tell companies what you need, I don't actually know what I need. So I'm discovering this for myself. So there's a lot to be also said for help to people who are late to this diagnosis to understand themselves, and also what help is out there, and where you take this once you know this about yourself.
Yeah, that's a great question, Richard. And again, I had a coaching client who that was the theme, late diagnosis, and I don't know what it is that I need. And so the two things that we talked about was, wouldn't it be great if your organization actually offers you a menu of things that you can go, yeah, I need that. Oh, I don't know if I need that. Definitely don't need that. So one is almost the organization offering you options. And again, I don't buy this prima donna stuff. If you feel you need something, it's genuine. It's not you being difficult or whatever. And then the second is that give yourself permission for that to evolve. You don't need to get it right straight off. And similarly, your organization gives you permission for that to evolve as well. Yeah.
Having a look at the questions that we received from our survey, this may have been covered in different words, but how do you integrate into a new job, whether you have a diagnosis or not?
As a neurodivergent person, how do you integrate into a new job?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's kind of a very broad question,
I
isn't
know.
it? I think, well, okay, here's an answer. It's not the only answer.
Mm-hmm.
Would be to start off by being self-aware. So spend a bit of time, if you haven't already, working out what you need in order to thrive in your job. And if you don't already know, then thinking back to situations where you've absolutely felt at your ease and been able to produce your best work. If you can think back to any examples of that, then that will give you a clue as to what you need in your work. And obviously the flip side, which sometimes is easier to recall, situations that have felt absolutely dreadful to you will give you a clue as to what you definitely don't want in your new job. And then, I don't know, it might be things like, oh, I know someone liked the idea of the buddy for interviews. How about a buddy at work? You know, is there someone that could be your buddy when you start up at work? And if you've disclosed that you're neurodivergent, then you can ask for someone else who is neurodivergent. And if you haven't, then you're just asking someone who's going to be supportive. So that might help you integrate.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to have those conversations with your manager very early on about how you're finding work and what you need and what's working for you and what isn't. Yeah, hopefully that's
I particularly liked your comment about having a menu. You know, for those who are struggling and still are, you know, learning about themselves, wish there was a menu to think, oh, I actually do need that. That would be great, wouldn't it?
yeah. I'm
Um,
liking the remarks that are going in the chat about things that you're taking away, learnings, things that you might do. That's really good. Do keep adding those because it's interesting for me, but it's also for me as a coach. It's a way of you confirming with yourself, oh, this is something I've learned. This is something I'm going to take away. This is something I'm going to do. So
I'm sure I will be able to save this and share it on if it
mm,
helps.
yeah. And there's a suggestion from Stephen about the report by CIPD, which shows the benefit to organizations just from starting the conversation. Fantastic. Improvement in culture, management capability, productivity, well-being. We need that. We need to know what that report is, Stephen. It doesn't just benefit neurodivergent individuals, it benefits everyone. Yeah, just the conversations. Yeah, yeah. And you know, we don't have them. And it's such a simple thing to do, just to have the conversations. Yeah. Oh, great,
Oh,
fantastic.
amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to click on it straight away, so I've got it after the call. New inclusion at work report. Yeah. Oh, Emma, great. Inspired you to look further into this topic and become a neurodiversity champion. Yay. Well done. Yeah. Daraminda, apologies if I missay your name. Team sharing and additional approaches to sharing this within the team. Yeah. It's really good to hear that you're taking those things away, because they're just little things that can make a big difference. Yeah. It's another form of conversation, isn't it? And I can see other people are liking it as well. So yeah, great suggestion. Yeah. We've got 5 final minutes for any other questions.
I do have one last one that I don't know if we've mentioned, which might take up these few minutes. And
Okay.
thank you for everyone who has shared these beforehand. It's really helpful. This question asked, what support is available particularly for ADHD and autistic people post-diagnosis?
Yeah.
And are there any preferred, you know, insurers for private healthcare when it
Yeah.
comes to these diagnoses?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know about insurers.
Mhm.
But so being an associate with Genius Within, we have a hive mind.
Mm.
So I can always put the question to the hive mind and see if anyone comes back with that.
Oh,
So
amazing.
if I'm not making any notes, so Mona Lisa, if you can remind me of that one
I
afterwards.
am. Brilliant.
So so in Cambridge, there is a new ADHD clinic,
Oh,
and they've got a number of us coaches on their books. So they can, they can give you details of coaches post-diagnosis that you could then contact. And yeah, and of course, yeah, you can go to an organization like Genius Within and get support that way as well. If you are self-employed, you qualify for that as well as through an organization. Um, yeah, and then counseling, and I would strongly recommend that if you are dealing with, because your history may have lots of trauma in it, and it doesn't have to be a massive trauma. There can be massive trauma, but there can also be mini traumas that come from a lifetime of being misunderstood and not appreciated, and being told that you're difficult, or being told that you need to behave differently to how you're behaving, which doesn't sit well with you as an individual. So there can be lots of mini traumas. And so counselling can be helpful, with that as well. Yeah. The ADHD clinic I'll provide after this call. I'll look it up and provide that.
brilliant. I think it's probably, I know it was mentioned briefly, it's probably important to note access to work is there to look
Yeah,
into. I know, am I right that you didn't have to have a diagnosis to get that help?
you don't need to have a diagnosis. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant.
So, any final questions or comments? Those who haven't put what you plan to do or what insight you've gained as a result of today, it'd be great to see that in the comments. But likewise, we have, or maybe we don't. We're at the final minute, aren't we?
Yeah.
Shall we wrap up? Yeah, yeah. Did you have a wrap up thing you wanted to say, Mona Lisa?
Well, a very quick one, I think. It's been great to see how insightful this session's been, and everyone learning something from it. It's really helpful. And after running the 2-day online conference this year in March, I didn't know what to expect bringing this session and this particular topic, and will people sign up, will people join? So this was really great, and I will of course be sharing slides, as you said, Elisabeth, after. And if there are any other details that you want to know, do reach out to me or Elisabeth. And I do already have a new topic for the next session, which I'll be revealing hopefully this week. So I will get, please do watch this space.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's
Thank you.
really been a pleasure talking with you all today. Again, not as interactive as I planned, but it's been great to see and hear the questions. And yes, so thank you.
Thank you all. That's great. Brilliant. I'm going to stop recording now.